welcome to Expats on Air. So it's been a while. We've been away for a while, but we're back with a new guest, kind of an international man of mystery. And I'm only saying that because I'm going to need him to tell us what he's all about. So joining us today is Nestor Santana. He works at a startup called ScanTrust. And I think you could maybe introduce yourself a bit more, maybe talk about ScanTrust or talk about something completely different. You know, it's up to you.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. It's been literally years since I've spoken with you and seen your face. But when I saw you on LinkedIn, I thought I like what he's doing. I listened to one of the podcasts, and I wanted to connect. I think hopefully also on a personal note, when I'm back in the U.S. For a visit, because I'm not moving back anytime soon, I think I would love to drop in on you in Texas. And also, on that note, where in Texas do you live?
So I'm in Austin, Texas.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So the reason I asked that, not just to know where you are, is also because if I'm in Texas, I'm going to be dropping in on Scott Silverman,
Right.
who is part of my career origin story. And
Yeah.
he is part of the career origin story for a lot of people. Probably more people than some of them probably wouldn't even want to admit it. They
Probably
don't.
me
Scott doesn't
too.
get enough credit.
I would I
You
would
too.
I would definitely attribute Scott as well for me as well. Like he definitely helped me get my foot in the door in a lot of places. And we're even doing some work together now in Austin. You know, we both live here. We're doing some projects. Nothing big, but it's ongoing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's a very good friend, an old friend, and he is the reason that I am at all associated career-wise and otherwise with marketing. I've never liked the idea of being like an advertising career person, even though that's what I've become. And and it's irrational, but I've always enjoyed working in marketing and advertising with Scott Silverman. When I started out, I was in Beijing and I was just doing odd like web development stuff. Um, I was working for a Dutch company at one point called Pond Skater, and they had a remote control bait boat. And the bait boat, you would fill it with chum. You'd send it's actually terrible. It's really terrible. It's just baiting the fish by dropping chum remotely and then casting your line in there. It's just if you can't put the fish in the barrel, then you bring the barrel to the fish kind of thing. But anyway, I was working for companies like that here and there, mostly foreign companies in Beijing. And then Scott, I believe I met through Charlie, his son, Charlie Silverman, who I love to death. And at one point, I was Scott and Gail's neighbor in so right on near Chunxiulu and Xinfucun Zhonglu, which if any listeners have lived in Beijing, you'll know that's like right by Gongti, pretty central expat area. So that evolved into Scott was like, well, can you do this stuff? With the Photoshops and whatnot. And I was like, in my head, no, but I was to him, yeah, no problem. So I just learned how to be a very basic graphic designer. And then in the meantime, I was finding people to fill in that role. And then that spiraled out of control until now I'm working at ScanTrust, contracting into ScanTrust as the director of marketing.
That's
There's
awesome.
a lot of in between. Certainly the international aspect that you mentioned earlier. At one point when we were escaping China, and I say we because I have a family now, and before we had the family, we're thinking about that. We escaped to Tokyo, where I then worked for Lo Profero for a time, and they have a different name now. But and then from there, we made our jump to Finland, and from Finland to Estonia, where I've been for almost the better part of a decade now. So
Wow.
let me see. It'll be in August. It'll be 6 years, actually. Yeah.
Is your wife from there, from Estonia?
Yeah, so she was born here, but not quite raised here. So she was born in a country that doesn't exist anymore, the Estonian Soviet Socialist Republic,
Right.
which then became Estonia post 1991 when they gained independence. And because of the career trajectory of her father, particularly, but for other reasons too, her mom's preferences, they decided to move to Russia. And when she was a teenager, then my wife, moved to England, and then never came back to Estonia or to Russia, other than for familial visits. Um, but in a way, she's a foreigner here too. Um, there's a term here for that I think she fits into better. It's väliseestlased, which is like foreign Estonians, and she's kind of that way. Although she's taken ownership of that part of her identity, I think, as we've been here longer.
She's
And we've
a third
my kids,
culture kid.
yeah, totally. And my kids are, I think the best way to explain them is, or one a good way to doesn't really cover all the bases, but they're Baltic Latinos, because I'm obviously Hispanic, and
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and
Nestor
my kids are,
Santana. That
yeah, sure,
that
we
sounds
have
pretty Hispanic.
yeah, yeah, pretty easy to trace the line back to Spain, and then because of uh, where our family was for centuries, we have indigenous roots as well. So very mixed up. In Spain, they would say multiculti, which you can uh, parse to see what that means. But
Okay.
yeah, so there's a lot more that happened in between. But yeah, now I'm in Estonia, working for ScanTrust, which is a Swiss company. I've never even been to Switzerland. I've been to a lot of places, but not there. And ScanTrust is this connected packaging and goods company. We primarily use QR codes as an Internet of Things gateway. So if you put a QR code onto any physical product or good, now there's a reference point for it to be connected to a database. And so information can be updated on it, retrieved from it, et cetera. And there are several products that we get from that. But I think that's as much as we need to say about ScanTrust.
Well, I mean, I actually do have a question about that. Like, were you kind of
Oh, go ahead.
involved in early stage QR tech, at least from the marketing perspective?
Yeah, that's kind of a loaded question actually, because early stage QR tech does have to be separated from marketing tech, because that came way later. Denso Wave is a Japanese company that created the QR code and the way that the information can be coded into it. And there's not a whole lot of information relative to memory sizes and storage capacities that we know now in this day and age, but there's plenty for putting in, say, a URL. Or you can even string together a QR code then, but I'm getting carried away with that. So it was created actually for the automotive industry by Denso Wave in Japan to make it so that on the assembly line, you have some kind of way to automate organization and tagging of elements that are then eventually made into trucks, cars, and this kind of transportation or construction machineries. Somebody, and I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit, I don't know who first decided to take that out of the assembly line and out of automotive to then start using it as a consumer engagement element. Um, Fairly certain to happen in Japan though as well. And as you know, this is where then marketing, or MarTech started to pick up on it. In China, Japan, Korea, I mean, these East Asian countries, that's where you started first to see the pervasiveness of the use of QR codes as something that is used for payment systems. Eventually, that came about and became uh, completely endemic over there. And for advertising, for when you start to go forward and into um, let's say it's 2021. So like maybe you could probably place this better. Like when did WeChat start using QR codes? Um, that
Yeah, I don't remember the
immediately.
year exactly, but I mean, all the payment stuff started taking off in like 2014, I would say, which, the QR
Yeah,
codes are a big part of that.
I remember that change actually was so stark, and there was such a contrast that when so I left Beijing in yeah like, I want to say 2016. I might have said a weird year before, but 2015 or 2016. No, 2014. Yeah, 2014 makes more sense. Yeah, because I've been here for 6 years. So 2013, 2014, I left. And then when I went back for a visit, um, in addition to getting an upper respiratory infection because my lungs were virgin again,
As
if
you
you can do
do,
that.
as you do when you're in
Yeah.
Beijing, you know.
The shame of it was I was with my firstborn son and my wife, and all of us got respiratory infections. It's terrible. But when I went back, I realized that I can't pay for things in cash, and I didn't have this app anymore. I didn't even want the app because I'm somewhat sensitive to the privacy concerns that come along with using something like WeChat.
But Nestor, if you're not doing anything wrong, what are you really worried about? Are you really worried about the Chinese government getting into your phone? What are you doing so
Oh,
wrong? What's the matter
I,
here?
I'll, I like to shut that conversation down by saying, "What if I am doing something wrong? It's none of your business."
Now that's a great
Uh,
answer. That is that's the answer I'm going to start using.
yeah, no, it's not incriminating. It's just a possibility, and a good answer. So yeah, I tried to buy something at the little Xiao Mai Bu, which for the uninitiated is just like a bodega, a little shop, and they were like, "What are you doing with those little paper things? We don't know. Use your phone." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know how to do that." Um, I think we eventually had to like broke and then uh, had to install the thing because otherwise. And then I got a local friend in Beijing to put money on my account because you would need a bank account to then fund it. So yeah,
Yeah.
around that period. So after we'd been in Tokyo for a while for months, then we came back to visit, and that happened super fast.
So this
Um,
place, it's like a little shop, but they wouldn't take cash. They were one of those like trying to be, oh, WeChat only. Look how innovative we are.
yeah, and I found the same thing like in restaurants too, that
Yeah.
they reluctantly took cash, and that was that was already years ago. So I imagine now cash is all but not used, and I know that they're experimenting not with a super large test group, but the Chinese government is using the digital yuan and has been for a while to see how it goes because they want to roll that out as far as I can tell as soon as possible. They want to have the digital yuan functioning ASAP. But it's been years in the making, and I'm not going to say with total confidence that this all started with the QR code, but it is the facilitating tag, the gateway for those kinds of interactions, and
So
we're
what you're saying is you are the Cyberdyne systems of this kind of post-apocalyptic dystopian place where we can't use cash anymore. And they're like, "Oh, sorry, you got to download the Luckin app to buy my coffee, and you got to pay online." Is that? Did
um,
you help? Are you like the black guy in Terminator 2 who gets shot up by Sarah Connor, and you're there like making a QR code, but she came back in time. And she's like, "Fuck this shit. I want to pay cash. I just want to go back to things normal." And she was trying to murder you. Did that happen?
I was going to say I feel a bit more like Sarah Connor. I don't have any
Okay.
uh, gender dysmorphia or anything like that, but there is something to be said with relating dystopia and digital currencies because the rabbit hole runs real deep on that one, and one of the things about the digital UN is that uh, one of the plays with it is that it has a far better potential for displacing the US dollar as a global currency than their redback, which is the UN. It's it's just not going to happen with the UN. And if you have a digital currency, then you have a much more likely scenario where you would have uh, politically, once that's been greased, you have countries that are um, permissive to a degree, or accepting of China's rise, and realize that economically they're very closely intertwined. I mean, not realize, but just are more permissive of that. You have the United States is in a balancing act in this regard, although we're balancing further towards being in opposition to that rise. And we can get into the politics of that in a minute. But Germany also is a country that has been criticized a lot in Europe for not being vociferous enough about the complaining and making changes that would address some of the more controversial topics around doing business with Chinese companies. So if you have a situation where reserves are all in the U.S. dollar, and you have a digital currency that's a new one that makes transactions in that currency much easier, cheaper as well, especially when you get into transactions that are into tens, hundreds of millions of dollars, then you start to have more of a possibility for changing that the status quo with currencies. So yeah, then you get into privacy issues. So there's a carrot, an economic carrot, and then the result of that kind of a change could very well be that, well, the anonymity of cash is absolutely gone. Or what happens if all of your accounts are not just a Chinese currency that's digital, but let's say an American one? If all of your currency is in that, if all your money is in that currency, then let's say you owe the government for a parking ticket. Instead of having the freedom and choice to be able to pay whenever you want, it could just be an automatic deduction. Any bit of your income that's official, and if there's no cash, then there is no other way but official means. Although hackers figure things out and criminals find ways, but ostensibly, then there would be no other way. And so, if there's any reason whatsoever that a government would use to limit your spending, to tax you for a penalty, to tax you, all of those things would be instantaneous, and then that could be in a bad faith actor in a government corpus, could lead to dystopic problems. Yeah.
I'd say even now in the U.S., because of COVID, there's a lot of places that don't take cash, and namely the airport. Like I was just flying last week out to D.C., and yeah, there's like no places that take cash in the airports. So it's kind of a development here. It's not a big QR code place, but it's a big little RFID chip and Apple Pay kind of place, So it's not much different from China if you really break it down. It's still digital payments at the end of the day, right?
Are you gonna miss the cash, or does it concern you?
I like cash. I like using cash. I was one of those foreigners. I left China in 2020, like right before COVID hit, Chinese New Year 2020. And I was always carrying cash with me. It was something I kind of cared about. I mean, I use WeChat Pay and Alipay all the time. I wasn't like some guy hiding in the woods, sending bombs to scientists or anything like that. I was still kind of doing everything, but I liked having cash, and I don't want to lose being able to use cash. I like cash. And the same in the US. I like using cash. Well, I don't want to say this on the air, but let's just say I like to hold on to a lot of cash too. Don't mug me, please.
And why would anyone mug you when it's obviously in your mattress? So
Well, we're in Texas, and it's a kind of a gun-friendly place, so you might get shot if you try to rob somebody too. There's always, there's implications.
that was not subtle at all.
I don't carry a
I
gun,
think
but I
cash is
might
endangered,
start.
and there's no other way.
Wait, what's that?
Yeah, cash is definitely endangered. It's
Yeah,
absolutely going that way. If Federal Reserve banks and central governments are experimenting with this very publicly, the whole goal of that is not to do research to find out how is it that people use. They already know that. We already know that. The whole point is let's work the kinks out because we're getting out of the beta stage on this. So that's coming, and cash will not be around for long. Cue the evangelicals freaking out.
it's the mark of
But
the
that's the
beast. Mark of the
yeah, well,
beast.
yeah,
It's either like a QR code, a RFID chip, an implant. You know, so it's all can be construed as a mark of the beast. I think pretty easily if you're required to do it.
yeah, and you can deconstruct that in a way that um, it's always going to lead to that. Like if you have a central authority, anything that they can do to assist in governing, even in the best with the best intentions, is something that serializes people and citizenry. So immediately you're opened up to the convenience of, like I said before, bad faith actors within a government entity to then give them convenience in acting in bad faith. And that's something that's been around ever since we've had government. And we know that because you can read it, in the book of Revelations. But my point in saying that is that it's not like a prediction. It's just the way that we are, that Homo sapiens interact with each other. Like if you have leaders and then you have like the citizenry, there are going to be tools that get introduced for that. And since time immemorial, there's always been this battle between the overreach, the and the maintenance or having to fight um, for civil rights and independence and to protect the everyman from the overreach.
Do you
So
think
when you
that's what
start
the
to get into
Bible?
that, yeah.
Sorry, cut you off. The slight delay in the stream, but do you think that's what the Bible's talking about with the mark of the beast? It's just almost like this is what happens. It's not like some precise revelation about some year in the future. It's more like a general kind of guideline for humanity or something.
No, I don't. I think the Bible is cookie dicks.
I think it's complete
I don't
horse
think it's.
shit. Well,
um,
maybe think
uh,
about it. Maybe that's. I'm not like some big Bible guy either. Like, but maybe there's something to that. I don't know.
no, and what I'm saying is there is something to that. Is and that it's logical. And there are aspects of the Bible, the Christian Bible, of the Quran, of choose your flavor. All of them have elements that make a lot of sense. Like do unto others. That's a principle that's shared among all major religions. I think probably nihilism also has an element of that. Like it's just like these things make sense, but when you start to get into, uh, there's a old white guy with a beard in the sky. Like, okay, you gotta uh, choose your uh, you choose what path you want to run down.
Yeah, and if
But
you want to get
I don't.
super topical for May 14th, 2021, if God said that this land is yours and like it's like really destined to be yours because He said so, you might like want to fight some people over it, and that kind of thing, right?
Hey, to name another date, the January 6th. Who's your
Got to
God?
fight. You got to fight for the Constitution, baby.
That's that's a really good point. No, you make a great point, and that is that if there's something that you want to happen or a convenient explanation for something, And ideally, like I like my explanations to be convenient. I don't. Do you like your? I like things to be simple.
Yeah, I
I think,
mean, it's not always simple though. It's nice if it's simple.
yeah, it's nice, and that's the point. And so, if God tells you that, um, you know, your neighbor's house is actually belongs to you, then like I'm not gonna argue with that. God said it. He's the highest authority. Get the fuck out of your house. It's mine. You know, this is, and I don't want to get
Yeah.
into Gaza Strip stuff, but
Yeah, I mean, well, who brought up Israel?
I guess I did.
Okay, no, I did,
Jesus.
but still, yeah, I see what you're saying. Well, this is I feel like we've gone on this great tangent. You know, we started with Scott Silverman and came down to Chinese digital currency and like people thinking God gives them some sort of authority over other people and all that. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to jump back to Scott Silverman because we brought him up, and I feel like
Yeah.
people listening, they're gonna be like, what the hell are they talking about? What was the beginning of this podcast? What was that all about?" And there's this guy who lives in Austin, Texas, and I know you through him. And it's funny how you're talking about your start of your career and how you kind of didn't know what you're doing, but you sort of learned on the way, and you kind of became a trusted partner of Scott of sorts. And you know, I always looked at you and I thought you were this international man of mystery digital guy because that's the way, like, I don't know. I was staying at Scott's house in Beijing. I was in college studying in Beijing. I stayed at his house. You were always around doing stuff. And you always seemed like this super, like, cyberpunk guy making it happen in Beijing. And there was a lot of mystique to you from my perspective at the time as a kind of like a naive college kid. I feel like that was my impression of you way back when 15 years ago or so when we were back there in Beijing.
Yeah. I'll take the opportunity to say that I love that man. Yeah, he is fantastic, and it pains me that I can't see him every day. Actually, the way that I used to back in that time, he's a joy. Never mind the professional aspect and how impressed I was at that time. Like, so you were younger than me then, but I mean, I was in my 20s at the time, and what I found quickly was that if you put Scott into a room with people, he inspires for entertainment, but confidence, and in almost anything. It's like, oh, well, Scott's sorting it out. Him and his team, they're doing it. And no matter how competent I was in any technical aspect or realm, no matter how well I could sort something out, I found myself going into the same sort of upsell pitch environments that he excelled at and did effortlessly, at least from my perspective. And people were like, why are we listening to you? Who the fuck are you? Who is this guy? And then Scott comes in and all eyes were on him. Notes were being taken. And I was like, that is a lesson that I didn't expect to learn when I came into this with Scott. So he inspires people. And in a way that is very important for business. He is like the ultimate account director guy, and
Yeah.
so um, that definitely was something that I've continued to learn from Scott, and every minute that I've had with him, especially in a professional environment. Um, but I think probably part of why the impression or the view of me might have been of like being a bit mysterious or secretive was probably because I half the time I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to be stoic, not complain about it, and
That's
just
pretty hilarious
keep walking.
because I feel like I've had those moments in like my career where I had the imposter syndrome and I was inexperienced and I didn't always know what I was doing, but you kind of learn as you go. Like it's trial by fire, especially if you're really put on the spot and you have ownership of something and you didn't really do the best job and you kind of feel that consequence of that, then you definitely don't want that to happen again, and you basically sharpen up after that. You learn naturally.
Keeping your cool is when you're regardless of your industry. It's an invaluable tool. There were many times where I did not keep my cool. And even with clients, there was an unnamed client. Scott will know when he's listening to this exactly who I'm talking about. But one of the largest, one of the top five, just to keep a bit of mystery into it, top five largest software companies in the world at the time. We had a client who I just could not stand. And I did the unthinkable, and she called being completely unreasonable, one thing or another. And I'd been shielding my team from it, I was acting as an account manager at the time. And that's what you're supposed to do as an account manager. You don't want your team to catch the crap. They get enough, doing the heavy lifting on production work, on creative work. It's your job as an account manager, an account director, a business development person to shield your team from that nonsense. And I had been doing it for a very long time with this person. And she calls in and starts raising her voice at me. And I went, hold on a minute. Do you hear that? And I hung up on her. I don't know if it was actually a wired phone. It was probably.
Did you have like a twisty phone where you got to like spin the wheel thing in Beijing in like 2005?
It was actually 1962. That happened, and so I'm just thinking of this now because I'm not the paragon of being cool. I definitely have lost my cool in the most, like, in situations where people would be like, why would you ever? That was so dumb. And that was dumb of me to do that because frankly, her boss, anyway, his boss, I think asked for me to be dismissed. And there are so many times, Nathan, that people have asked for me to be dismissed. Even in Tokyo, there was a situation, which I can tell you if you're curious.
I'm curious.
On the first meeting with me, it's like,
because I do a lot of account work.
Why is this guy?
I do a lot of account work, so I'm very interested in hearing all the times you've been dismissed. It's always very interesting to hear these kind of stories.
So I mean, I was eventually fired from Godfrey Q and Partners pretty unceremoniously, but I mean, the expectation was that I should have been fired maybe 2 years before, which is, I think, what the founder of the company said to me when he called me. He's like, you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Scott Silverman.
Scott Silverman. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I had my microphone on low volume, so yeah, it was a little late there.
Yeah. But the point of that is that I've not always kept my cool, and on the other hand, which you learn very quickly, and like
sorry, Nestor,
over the imposter syndrome.
Nestor, you kind of froze for a second, so we missed that last part you said.
Oh, once you get over the imposter syndrome stuff, and you have to, if you want to move forward, if you want to be anywhere near ambitious, or even just to do your job, you have to just be confident and say, well, somebody's got to do this stuff. And sometimes even a trusted and admired team member like Scott is not going to be completely current with what's going on in the situation. And you can't always go asking for permission for things or asking for advice for things. You have to come into your own. And that means taking risks, but also as you get lucky and gain experience, then it means that you'll be better at it, and you'll be better at keeping your cool in situations where you could completely blow it up and be satisfied in the second, or you could be humble and just keep your cool and manage the situation and move forward and just think about the bigger picture. And there were lots of times that I did that, and doing more of that actually is what made me a better team member and made me a better person. And I'm absolutely certain that would be if I was an electrical engineer, if I was running an agency, if I worked in government, whatever it was, that's something that 100% is beneficial and is part of growing and being a better person, especially with regard to your career. So, yeah, I mean, there was one time actually at Godfrey Q where one of the founders of the company, like really blew up at me because I was talking about our accounting system. And I was telling him that with like plenty of other team members present, I was in Beijing, and I was telling him that something along the lines, not at all disrespectful, but he didn't like me for a long time anyway, so this is why this happened. But I said, you guys in California don't know the problems that we're going through here with this accounting system. You don't understand it. And before I could finish, I got bombarded with paraphrasing here, you little shit. I don't want to hear you saying crap like that. I started this business and I'm not going to take this kind of crap from you. Like, would have loved to have fired me on the spot. And I responded very coolly. Like, people in front of me, because we were in a conference room in Beijing, they were like visually biting their fist and like looking at each other like, oh my God, what is happening?
That's very heavy.
Flipped out of me.
Very heavy.
But I mean, what could I do? I was just like very quick thinking and just like, look, nothing here has been said that is offensive. These are facts. And so what I said was, I understand your frustration with that, but if you go across the street to the cafe, across from the office, so I put it in perspective into where he was, and you try to access the system from there, then and only then would you the difficulties that we're having, because we're trying to connect to that system. So I went into some very simple technical details, and we're even in another country. So this makes it very difficult for us to do our job using this software. And then someone on the side over there where he was sort of echoed that and said, that is true. It is a problem that was actually demonstrated to us the last time these guys were in town. And then it quickly went from here to there. Now, that didn't change the fact that this guy did not like me at all. That didn't change it. But it did disarm the situation.
Sounds
because
like
it made it completely baseless.
It made him look stupid, really, right?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit.
Or just made him look hot-headed, at least.
It's absolutely, and that wasn't my intention, but he could do that on his own.
Yeah,
But regardless of what the situation is, like you have to remember also that part of being in an organization like that, especially when you're dealing with a founder, is that they're a founder. And it's absolutely inappropriate. I don't care who you are, how much you're paying someone, how little you're paying someone, whatever it is, no one is above common courtesy. And most people in those positions will usually, at least in my experience, will usually maintain that. But sometimes, in that case, then that gets forgotten. And that's unfortunate. But you as someone, like I could have said, you know what, you take this, don't talk to me that way. And then it would have been over, and he would have loved that. He really would have. I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah, he could have pulled "You're fired" like Vince McMahon from WWE. You could have given that opportunity.
Yeah. But that's not what I was about. And interestingly enough, like even in the instance, maybe as a younger person, I would have done well, I don't need this. But I didn't even have a hot-headed response. I was just like, why are you acting crazy? Why you got to be crazy? Look, this is what it is.
Yeah, and you were getting to business. You were kind of addressing a real business challenge, and he's kind of distracting from that.
Keeping your cool and just focusing on what's real is something that maybe for some people, and certainly for me, it wasn't easy in the beginning, but when it becomes natural, it is a life lesson that, it could save your life even. And it's not always intuitive, but it is super important. And I would say it's one of the most important keys to just making anything happen in something that, I don't mean like making scrambled eggs and toast. I mean something that takes a long time, that requires building months of work or even years. That particular way of dealing with it and reacting to it, that's something that I learned working under and with Scott, and it's something that I'm taking with me every day
Hey,
to anything that I do.
to step back a bit, we're talking about some marketing speak, account people. So some people listening might not know what any of this stuff is. Can you kind of explain what is the structure of this kind of team you're on? What is an account person? And then who are the other people that you're working with in this kind of situation?
Yeah, not to get into the weeds too much, but when you have a marketing campaign, when you're doing advertising, you need to have a relationship that starts between the team that is working on it, whether they're an internal team or whether they're an external agency, and the brand owner who has the biggest overall vision for the company, and also the people that manage the products themselves, and also the people that sell the products, because the juxtaposition of all those different information points, and you as like saying, like, putting myself at the center of this as like the agency side of things, you need to also have the perspective of your teams and what's possible, or what's a reach, and what experience dictates is going to be the best solution for what is the likely problem or scenario. So you have to get at the point where all of these perspectives come, and it's not a solid point. It's kind of a blob that keeps moving, right? To manage that relationship, it may happen initially with like one of the founders of the agency or something, but eventually needs to go to like a team lead on the agency side. So that's going to be like an account director, and that's someone who maintains the relationship and stays on top of like what's the latest that's happening with this company that is going to affect how it is that we talk about what they do and how it is that we sell what they do. Because that, at the end of the day, the reason that they come to work with an agency is because these are people that are dedicated specifically to selling, I should say not selling, but creating demand for what they do. And to be able to do that in a way that's accurate, so people aren't surprised and then bail, and in a way that is interesting, exciting, you have to have all of these details managed. And it means you have to manage that relationship to stay on top of what's the latest. There is no syndicated news update that comes from a client, from a brand. You have to maintain regular meetings. You have to have many times it turns into a social relationship as well. Just because that's the nature of like the same thing as working with someone in the same office. There are people that you like and that you don't, but you still have a relationship with them. And it's one that's necessary because you need to be on top of the latest things. What happened in the last 24 hours, 48, 72, what happened last month? Because that's going to affect how it is that we do our job. So that relationship between the brand, the product seller or service seller, and the agency is typically managed by someone who's directing all that. And then you have people underneath in that hierarchy that are account managers, and there are different names for what those people are, account executives, what have you. And I can't pretend to say that this is entirely current either, because I haven't worked in a traditional agency for a long time.
It's current. I mean, I'm still in this environment, and that's definitely how it is.
Yeah, so then you have account managers, and they also do that kind of same stuff. Probably there's a lot of versatility with a good account manager. It's someone who is going to be very good with people, is going to be able to be interesting, and someone that the client looks forward to engage with, ideally. Doesn't miss a beat, is all over the details. And I mean, there have been times where I've acted as an account manager where it's been very secretarial, where you're kind of just taking orders for the fry cook. And, that's why you have, in that realm, project managers, which is another role in the team, where they watch and keep track of like what's happening, what's been ordered, what are we supposed to make for this particular brand? When is it supposed to be ready? When is it supposed to be to printers? When is it supposed to be online? Are we using another resource for that outside of our own team internally? And so from there down, not that it's necessarily so hierarchical. I mean, it is, but it's not in a terrible way in my experience. But there you start to get into the weeds, and you start to see different specific responsibilities you have. For example, with creative work, which is to say the things that we eventually see and hear, you have creative directors, you have graphic designers, and then you have specializations there, animators, video editors. All of these then start to be the engine that creates something that is meant to then create that demand among the clients and customers and the people that your brand eventually serves. And the goals that those clients are going to have, and I'll try to wrap this up. I don't want to make it marketing 101 too much, but the goals that they have could be anything from releasing a new product to introducing themselves for the first time to a larger region or to the world at large. Whatever it is, that creative is meant to solve that problem. And then there's media and media purchasing, which is very lucrative, or it certainly can be. Whether you're buying spots that are algorithmically driven on Facebook, and that takes us to Apple and Facebook. That's an interesting topic. Or if you're doing out of home, which is airport placements or signboards on bus stops and what have you. Whatever it is, it all ties back to this account relationship that gets managed with those people and the brand or the product managers on the brand side. And then a brief or details about what's required then gets taken into this engine room so that you get the right creative, which is as I've described previously. And so it's kind of like this feedback loop, because it starts at the top in this relationship and the road with the client, and it goes through this sort of chain of production, and then it simmers at the bottom, and then it steams back up to the client. And if everything's been handled well, even things like, let's make it clear and in a way that's respectful, that you can only say no 3 times if everything has been checked, and you have to agree with the client and get, that's a difficult part of the account relationship sometimes. Ideally, it wouldn't be that difficult, but sometimes it's very difficult to say, this is what we're going to do. It's going to hit these 5 bullet points and, sub bullet points if you want. But we're going to give you 3 versions of that, and then we have to run with one of them. But you have to trust us, and that's why you're working with us, that what we're suggesting is going to do the job. It's going to increase that demand and create the demand for what it is that you guys do as your business. So that's, I think, my marketing 101, at least structurally, team-wise.
Okay, yeah. That went a lot deeper than what is an account manager, but I think it kind of explained the context of why the account manager exists. And then you said Scott was like the perfect account director, and so he's a relationships guy, but he's also quite creative and stuff too. Yeah, so he kind of wears a few hats, huh?
Well, I don't, especially because I'm sick of talking about marketing right now. It's important to say this about Scott, and that is that marketing was just something he did because he had to at one point. I mean, if Scott could do whatever he wanted to do, he would be, running a podcast that is listened to by millions of people, and they'd be lucky for it because he's got great perspective, great experience, and he's hilarious. And even when he's not trying to be. So that is something that made him successful as someone who controlled and managed accounts and those relationships. Just him being who he is. But in reality, it was just almost an externality. Like he is someone who wants to entertain and does entertain. I don't know how much you know about him getting started in marketing, but it was like he was, I want to say, doing I'm having a brain fart here. What do you call? Oh, improv. I think he was doing improv in Los Angeles, with a group, and he was absolutely stoked to be doing that. And I think he was also doing a radio show. He may have been known as the Beast in that show. He can correct that if we ask him.
Well, I mean,
But
I got to get him on the show. I mean, we've already talked about him coming on, but I think this is like a great teaser warm up for Scott coming on the show. You know?
he's just, yeah, he's totally kick ass, and he should be on the show. Um, so like one of the guys that he was doing this improv, and I hope I'm not getting that wrong, with Scott was like, I need to make some money, man. I've got a family. I love doing this, but it's just not bringing in the dough. And he was like, well, why don't you come and work in marketing? You know, come work at Ogilvy. And that was sort of the beginning of all of this. It was the beginning of my career. This is the beginning of your career in marketing. That it all started in California, and I want to say in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And
the guy doing
not
improv.
too long. Yeah, just you know, he's like, well, why don't you go do this? It's like, try it if you don't like it, whatever. And that'd be a really good story to get rehashed by Scott. But that tells you everything. Is that it was just like everybody has to work, everybody has to have a job. I would say even if you're a billionaire, you need to do something. And for those of us that are not billionaires, far from it, but you have to do something not just because it's what you require as a person, but because you need to put food on the table. And that very much is what brought Scott into marketing. And so I don't think he would say that he has not enjoyed it, although that he's got a lot of unpleasant stories, including people shitting themselves on the Great Wall of China, clients of his, and him having to clean it up.
Oh man!
But I'll leave that to him.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah.
So, but I it just wasn't. It's not like he didn't dream of, and neither did I, like being a marketer.
And on that note,
shit on the job.
And on that note, you said you were sick of talking to marketing, and I could do without talking about marketing since that's also my job. Now, I wanted to ask you a question, and I'm kind of afraid it's one of those cliche guy in Estonia questions. What's up with that, like, E-Citizenship or whatever? Oh my god, I can't type right. Do you know what I'm talking about? The E-Citizenship
it's
for Estonia?
Yeah, of course. E-residency, yeah. I actually became an e-resident just because I thought it was cool that you would have this encrypted card that you could use to manage your finances. Like you could manage your bank account, but do it in an encrypted fashion. You could pay your taxes just by putting in your card, and that's moved on. Like the way that it works now is you could do it through your mobile phone. It has an encrypted chip and encrypted communications. But e-residency is a scheme that the Estonian government put together for people to run businesses as if they were in Estonia, but not being in Estonia. So it would mean that you would be subject to the tax laws that are present and prevalent here in Estonia. For example, by and large, there is no income tax on businesses. So if you have, let's say you were paying me to be on this podcast, which if you want to, that's fine. Let's say you paid me $100 and then you paid it into my bank account, but not my personal one, but my company one. Then there would be no taxation on that until there's a disbursement. And at that point, then there's, depending on what it is that I did for you. Let's say I made you some cupcakes, then I think it's 20%. If I did something else, it would be maybe 16%. Or I don't remember the exact breakdowns. But only at the point of disbursement, when it's something is paid out from the company, is there a taxation. So you can manage and get that benefit if you wanted to do that and have your business based out of Estonia remotely by having this e-residency system. And to set it up, you would need to go through some kind of identity. I think they've made it so you even have to come to Estonia. You could do it at like an embassy,
Yeah,
so that they verify who you are and anything you do for that business.
I pulled up something here. Looks like you can apply with this website, whatever it is. I'm not endorsing these guys, but
No, neither
looks
am
like
I.
yeah.
And I don't do e-residency. I did it just because I thought it was cool when I first got here, but it doesn't. There's no. I mean, I'm a resident here, so there's no reason for it.
I'm already in Estonia. You're not in like Uganda where like it might be useful for you to be doing this, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could see how it would be useful for someone even in the US, like because if you wanted to have income that was outside of the US for your company and you wanted to manage taxes for your company that with that tax code, which you could see income wise and in terms of what you would have to pay on income could be very, very much preferable, then you would do it. If you needed to have it a European entity for a client, you could set up a company very, very quickly. I used to have a company in Hong Kong, but it was a huge pain in the ass. Doing all the tax reporting for the US meant doing an entire expensive, very expensive. I don't make the kind of money that would have made it permissive at the time anymore. But it was like thousands of dollars to do the annual audit that would be necessary, not just for the Hong Kong government, but also for the US government. So it was like, at the time, I was like, well, I'm making a lot more money, but this costs a lot, and it wouldn't be possible in my situation now. But if you look at the taxation services, like accounting services, and what's required for annual reporting here in Estonia, I mean, you could get away with paying a few hundred euros for your entire setup, and you're done. And now you have an Estonian payment company, and you can decide how it is that you want to disperse those things. Now, if you pay yourself from that company into the U.S., then you're taxed at, when all income in the U.S. is taxed according to your bracket. That has nothing to do with that. You're going to get taxed on anything that you pay yourself. But there is the advantage of no income tax to the company in Estonia. Plus, if you have to have that, then for a European client or something, setting that up does make sense, not just to Ugandans. And again, I am not advertising this and saying you should do this, but it's something to look into if you wanted to have like an offshore company, and something that's very convenient and I'd say not. There's good value in creating an Estonian company. So e-Estonia is all about exporting that technology and encouraging people to take advantage of the tax code here. And I think the government has made like maybe a lot, like a couple million or something off of the scheme. And there are a lot of takers. There are a lot of people who have started to use it. In practical terms for citizens here, e-residency is unrelated and there's no point in it for people that are residents here. But what you do get is things like your medical records, your health insurance, your annual taxes. All of that gets done through your encrypted identity. So I have an identity card that has like an encrypted chip on it, but I also have my mobile phone, which has an encrypted connection that I can do my taxes actually because of that encryption and the identity confirmation here in Estonia literally in 1 minute, if not less, because everything that comes into my account is associated with me and shared with the government immediately. On a month-to-month basis, all that stuff is you just check it and then you say yes. So that's a matter of seconds. And at the end of the year, when it's time to submit your taxes and do your tax returns and all that, it's all facilitated by the fact that there's no paperwork. Everything is online, and that's possible because of this encrypted ID that everyone has. So that's something that could be very valuable to countries that spend a lot of money on just even paper, uh, and requiring like signatures having to be mailed one place to another. All of that is just eliminated entirely. So time-wise, cost-wise, for bureaucracies, that's the advantage of the e-Estonia thing.
Now, we
And
talked a bit earlier about like centralization and the dangers of that. How about this? Because it's very centralized. But how about like cybersecurity? Is there some vulnerability there with the system?
well, I would say one thing with regard to how things are stored in the system, and I'm not a systems engineer, so I can't tell you in great detail, but I do understand it to the point that it uses something called X roads, which is not like blockchain exactly, but it has the similarity in that every record that is associated with a person, a business, or anything that's online is can be accessed by depending on permissions. So if you have permissions from like the Customs and Taxation Bureau to access anyone's records, then when you access it, then there's an addition appended onto that record showing that this person, this specific person with this particular ID and this particular position accessed it on May 14th at 9:12 a.m. And so what that does actually is, because it's a public record, it is actually kind of a decentralized system in that permissions, whether they're granted or not, depending on your permissions, you can access, modify, and do whatever you need with those systems. But it's appended onto that record, onto that data, so that in perpetuity, anyone can see what's happened with this. So it means if you were dealing with like a bankruptcy case or a civil litigation or something, like you can't have like a corrupt, bad faith player, like I keep saying, or like a bad cop in a criminal case come in and edit a record without it being like stamped on that this is the person who did it. And actually, there's been cases like Estonia is far from a perfect place. I mean, what country is, but not too long ago, they were forging IDs, which are these encrypted systems, like associated with each one person. And of course, the person that was issuing the IDs was a cop who accessed the system and was like, I'm just a bit of an idiot. And they got busted like really quickly because you're like, you issued like 100 of these things. What are you, fucking stupid? You're in jail for the rest of your life. And that's how the X-Road system is meant to work, is if you're going to do anything related to these IDs, the moment we catch someone with them, we can see who issued it without any problem. Whereas we have a legacy system in the US, which could really benefit from something like this, where if you issue a driver's license from the state of Texas, and you do it for, I don't know, $500 so that someone has a fake ID, even though it's a real one. Like if a kid or a criminal gets caught with that ID, good luck finding out who did it. It's probably impossible. And so that's the difference. And that's where decentralization and centralization comes into play with this thing.
Cool. Now, we talked before we started recording about how many countries you lived in, and I want to revisit that. So how many countries, you're American, yeah? American citizen?
Yeah, it's the only citizen I have.
Okay, but outside of America, how many countries have you lived in?
So I said 6 before, and
Yeah. Was that like, that includes the U.S. or it doesn't include the U.S.?
yeah, no, it includes the U.S. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Well, it doesn't
let's see,
really
I lived in
matter.
the U.S. until I was. Yeah, I'm just trying to think it through. The second country that I lived in, I was born and raised in Chicago, and then when I was, I mean, we had family in Tennessee and in New York, so we traveled a bit before. But when I was 8 years old, my sisters and I moved to Ecuador for 2 years, And part of that was that literally uh, my father was in such regret that we didn't speak Spanish. Um, Honestly,
He's
he's just like, why didn't I speak to you guys in Spanish enough that I mean, I can't even have a conversation with you. He's like, go live with your grandma. So we
and
lived with
was
our grandma for 2 years in Ecuador.
oh,
So that was
so
the first
he
country I lived in.
so I was thinking he was like relocated there because he spoke Spanish or something, but he just wanted you guys to speak Spanish.
Yeah, it seemed like a real like a loss. It would be, I mean, to be honest, it'd be weird if Nestor Santana didn't speak Spanish, right? I would think so, a little bit.
Is Nestor
Um,
a Spanish name?
so it is originally a Greek name. It's millennia old. It's you'll find it in the Iliad and the Odyssey. The character was Nestor from Sandy Pylos, and that name uh, from antiquity then got used a lot in, I think, Mediterranean countries. And as a result of that, because of the nature of immigration and colonization of South America, then you have um, Nestor as a common name in countries like Argentina, Chile, Ecuador. Um, Probably more common in Argentina for some reason. But what I've discovered actually when I came to Eastern Europe was that Nestor is also a common name in the Ukraine. That surprised the hell out of me. Although, you know, Cyrillic has its roots in very obvious ones typographically in the Greek language,
Yeah.
and they certainly are closer. So, um, oddly enough, in Estonia, people often get confused because Nestor is a last name here, and it has been. It's like an Estonian last name.
So they think
So
you're
it's a
Santana
very
Nestor.
old Santana. Well, yeah, people think, is that
I'm
your
like,
first name? What's
oh,
going on?
his parents must have loved Santana, and they just named him Santana Nestor.
There is a guy, a cool fellow that I know from Beijing whose name is Santana Wilson. He's American, but he's of Brazilian ancestry. So Santana is also a very common last name in Brazil. I'd say probably more common than in other South American countries and even in Mexico, where Carlos Santana, I think, is from.
And
Or
then you said
maybe, yeah.
your grandmother's in Ecuador. Was that correct?
Yeah, she's since passed, but that's where that was the first country. So I
Okay.
think
Sorry.
actually I'm going to play it safe and say I've lived in 5 countries. I've
Okay.
properly lived in. Yeah.
Oh wait, so that includes the U.S., right?
Yes, it does include the
Okay,
U.S.
so you're four, because that's the thing. I was gonna do this. Oh wait, it's kind of messed up anyway. I was gonna do 5 Mr. Worldwides because it's based on how many foreign countries you lived in. So if you're
Yeah.
American, so if we're going down to four, it's a bit of a
What's
downgrade
let,
on the
well,
air.
let me ask this,
But
just
yeah, go
as a
ahead.
last ditch effort. What qualifies? What's the time threshold for having lived in a country?
3 months. 3 months straight.
Yeah, I missed
You
it.
can't just be like
I I,
a few weeks
I
here and
lived
there.
in Finland for just about a month, so I guess it doesn't count.
Well, a month, and you're in Estonia. How similar are they? Are they like almost the same, or are they very different?
Uh, the short answer is quite different. Um, Finnish people and Estonian people are quite different, but
Yeah, you would think.
there is a big, huge but from the outside perspective. So the people that have no familiarity, you couldn't find two closer countries, at least language-wise, and to some degree culture-wise. The entirety of the Baltic region, including all the way to Denmark and Sweden, and then the other Baltic countries, Lithuania, Latvia. There are elements that are common throughout them that are like geographical things. There's also like this common, especially along the like the Finnish Bay and going down to Lithuania, this common history with Imperial Russia, and then after that Soviet Russia, which has not. always been pleasant. I'd say more unpleasant than not. But there are similarities there that, like, after living here, you start to see that you never would have, you wouldn't get even as a tourist. So there are people that would say, "Oh, Estonian and Finnish, that they're very, very similar." But after having lived here and speaking the language as well, you see actually they're really different. I mean, very, very different. I think
Now,
it's like I don't know, like Polish people and Russian people. Like, to the uninitiated, it'd be like, I don't know, those are just Slavic people, right? Like, no, they're not only are they different, but they actually fucking hate each other.
now, the Finnish, do they eat a lot of reindeer?
It depends, I think, on where you live. If you live in Lapland, you get closer to the Arctic Circle, then you're probably getting a lot of reindeer sausage. Yeah. I can tell you this, even here in Estonia, I can go to the grocery store and I can get reindeer sausage.
That sounds delicious. Now, yeah, I did a layover in Finland once. I was flying to Germany from China, and there was
Mhm.
I forget what airline it was. I think it was a Chinese airline, and it was super cheap. It was like Junyao Air or something. It was super cheap to fly
Oh, wow.
through Helsinki. Is that Finland, right?
Yeah.
Do I got that
Yeah,
right?
it's the capital of
Yeah,
Finland.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. So Helsinki, and then I went to Germany after that. But it was a very nice, quiet airport. Looked like a pleasant place outside. I didn't go outside, but there was a lot of reindeer goods, at the
Yeah.
little gift
It would have
shop,
been. Yeah.
at the little sausage joint. You get like a hot dog, but it's, Scandinavian style or something where it's like a reindeer sausage. I don't know. I had the airport experience of Finland, so I don't really know
Yeah.
what it's all about. But reindeer was the impression I got. It's a reindeer kind of place.
Yeah. Moose as well. You get, and as soon as you cross the border, although you can find it here too, not in all grocery stores, but you can find tinned bear meat. Um, and it's not like, oh, this is
Now, how
like a super
is
oddity.
how is the tinned bear meat? How does it taste?
I have to admit, I haven't tried it.
Ah, but how about
I
the
have I
reindeer?
have done moose and reindeer, and you know, I haven't. Well, hold on. I think I have had moose steak, and I remember thinking it was great. I mean, maybe they tenderize it or something. Maybe they just knew which cut to put in there. It was pretty good. But the thing about reindeer sausage is, like, I mean, there's a lot of, like, a good sausage. You're going to probably add in some other fats, right? They probably put in some pork fat, and then of course seasonings. So, and when it comes to sausage, you can say it's let's say it's 80% deer meat, and then the rest of it is stuff that makes it palatable.
Okay, but isn't deer meat good? Like it's like really good lean red meat.
Um, you know, I've never bought it like in, like, untreated format. You've got me curious though. Now I might actually go for it soon. I'm gonna go look for it. I've been So they grow turkeys here, and I actually eat a lot of turkey. I'll get like a big turkey thigh, like, a couple kilos chunk, and I'll make stews out of that. And nobody can tell that it's not beef, just because of the way I make it, and also just the nature of the meat.
I
But yeah,
wasn't
I'm gonna try this.
expecting you to say beef. I was expecting to hear like chicken or goose or something like that. Like they think so.
No,
Turkey,
it's
turkey soup. They think
I
it's
make
beef.
not a soup. I mean, that's
Yeah.
a probably would taste a bit more poultry-like in that case. But I will. I do like a beef bourguignon style stew, and
Oh.
I use turkey, and it just people are just like, oh, which meat is this? And I tell them turkey, and they're like, no, come on. I thought it was reindeer or beef or.
Some kind of red
And
meat.
that's amazing. Yeah, and I think it's a great meat. Um, Turkey, I got a lot of time for turkey. And turkey has an interesting story. The only reason it's called turkey is because Europeans associated this new bird that came from the New World, from America, with Orientalism or exoticism, and exotic things came from Turkey, so they called it turkey. fucking weird.
I thought it was gonna be like because their heads were red and those guys like wear those fez caps or whatever in Turkey.
You do it,
That
you
was
know,
my
that would
assumption.
be. I think we can retroactively say that was the reason, but in reality, it was just something foreign and exotic, so they called it turkey.
Look at those turkey birds. They're
Yes,
so turkey and
can we?
exotic. I bet they're
And we eat them
delicious.
in the parlor. That's
Yeah,
exactly
because you
what
go to
happened.
these Renaissance fairs in America, and it's supposed to be harking back to like old European days. And you're eating turkey legs, but turkeys are like a North American bird. I never really got that about Renaissance fairs. Why the turkey legs?
Yeah, so you wouldn't have gotten turkeys in Europe until the 16th, maybe 17th century more widely. And it
Oh,
was it was like a it was
Renaissance.
like a
Six. Yeah, okay, there you go.
but it would have been, at least I'd say 17th century where you started to get it more widely available. And even then it was, so rich people would eat it. So then there's a curious thing actually with our turkeys in America is that the domesticated turkeys that were raised and made to be, bigger breasts and more meat, probably a bit less cantankerous. Those birds got brought back to America, like even before the colony times, and they started to be the bird that was preferred to the wild turkeys. So you've got these domestic turkeys that have changed over the centuries drastically, and then you've got the wild turkeys. So that domestication, by and large, happened in Europe, and then we got them back in America.
Yeah, I did not know that
But
about
yeah, it's
turkeys.
not totally inappropriate in a Renaissance fair, I think, to have turkey.
Okay. Yeah, I always feel like the Renaissance fairs, they're trying to be more medieval. It doesn't feel like Shakespeare times. It always feels like,
No, you're
I don't
right.
know,
Yeah, it wouldn't be appropriate to
like
have. They wouldn't have had
Braveheart
a
times.
single turkey. They wouldn't have had a
But
single turkey.
they made us wear masks too, so that wasn't very relevant. And they were trying to do plague times. They tried to. I mean, it was actually a lot of fun. I went to this one called the Sherwood Forest Fair in Texas last month, and I feel like they could have done it better if they gave everybody like disposable plague masks. Like the little bird looking mask.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like they
Like
have
the
these like disposable ones that are that shape. If they gave those out, I thought that wearing masks would be appropriate. But it was all outdoor, and they still made people wear masks. And we're in Texas, where you don't need to do that. You don't need to make people wear masks outside, or inside for that
mm,
matter. But they still had people do it, and it was just kind of took away the magic of a Renaissance fair and people pretending like they're in the times. But if they were plague masks, it would have worked.
and that's a missed opportunity for them. I would pay a couple extra bucks for the plague mask. I would have done it. That's just me.
That's just me. Estonia, I don't have a big connection to that country. I did go to school with a guy in high school who I think his family was with the Estonian embassy in Japan, and I was living in Japan. And then
Yeah.
I worked with a girl in China from Estonia. Now I've never been there. What's it like? How could you describe Estonia to somebody who's never been there before?
Um, First of all, it's hard to have a big connection with Estonia because it's not a big place. It's less than 1.5 million total population. Um, so, I mean, what's the population of Austin? It sort of gives you perspective on how small it is.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't
And
even know the answer to that question, but it's probably a
uh,
lot.
it's bigger than Estonia by far. And yeah, the country gained independence from the Soviet Union in 1991 when that just fell apart. And it's actually, so depending on who you talk to, some people don't like it being put this way, and I understand why. But the second independence, the first independence was earlier in the century, their independence from Imperial Russia. And that happened for all the Baltic states, which is those three sisters, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. So then when the Soviet Union was just melting away, they saw their chance and they said, okay, well, we're out. And then as soon as the Estonian government saw a chance, they joined the European Union. And they knew that being who they are, being where they are, and knowing their history, which includes constantly being ruled over for centuries and centuries. They were a land that was controlled by the Swedes for, I think, even up to now, the longest time. The Danes, and there's a Germanic sort of managerial class that's always been here until the 20th century. Yeah, so they took their independence and then joined EU as soon as they could, and they were really anxious to join NATO because of their history, because of their geography, and because of their big brother just to the east, Russia. So they pulled that off, and as a result, have really been able to lift themselves out of a bad situation that had been continuing for centuries. As far as sort of current day Estonia, it has one of the highest. Give me a second, a bit of a break.
Yeah, no worries.
Hi, Mom.
Oh, okay. I thought I muted your shit. Jesus. I'm trying to mute your shit, but it's not working.
So that was not my mother. I just called my wife Mom, which it's not weird. We have kids. That's
okay. All right. I'm not judging. It's judgment-free zone here.
Yeah.
Is
so
that like is that like an Estonian thing though? Is that like something you guys do over there?
I don't know. It's like the kids call her Mom, and so I call her Mom. She calls me Dad.
I do that too, man.
That's
Dude, I mess up sometimes, and like I'll say something like related to my mom. Like basically my son calls my mom Tiny Mom instead of Grandma. She's Tiny Ma. So like I've accidentally called my wife Tiny Mom before, and she didn't like that.
no.
She's not Tiny Mom. She's
That's
just
not a good
Mom.
mistake to
Yeah.
make. Yeah.
But
So one of the highest per capita incomes. I think it is the highest per capita income among the Baltic, the three sisters Baltic states. Finland is higher, but identity-wise, there are some people here that feel a lot of people that feel that they should be Nordic. Part of the reasoning, or at least the argument for it and the litigation for it, would be that Finland is a Nordic country. We have a very close and similar history, very like the closest modern language to them, etc. As an example to sort of show how close they aspire to be or believe to be and probably are. I mean, geographically, there's no argument, right? It takes a couple hours on a ferry to get across the bay from Tallinn to Helsinki. But the national anthem has the exact same music for both countries, Finland and Estonia. So they borrowed it from Finland, and then it has, obviously the words are in Estonian and not in Finnish. But there isn't a lot of intelligibility between the languages. And
yeah, that's what I've heard. That Finnish itself is a pretty unique language in terms of like all the kind of mother languages and all that. And then Estonian is similar to Finnish. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I can put it this way very honestly. If I had to communicate entirely in Estonian with a Finnish person, we can get by. Like if we had to do rudimentary things or even tell our like family histories, we could understand each other. It's far from perfect, and there are like some treacherous false friends, as they call them, like words that mean one thing in one language. And one example is the word for Bible in Finnish is raamat, and in Estonian that just means book. And then there are some raunchier ones after that. But Yeah, that similarity gives you a bit of perspective on it. But also my previous statement that they're Finnish people and Estonian people are very different, very different. And it has a lot to do with the 20th century, late 20th century history, I'd say. The mix of the country is it's not densely populated. The most densely populated area is, perhaps not surprisingly, the capital of Tallinn. About half the country is covered in forest, and as soon as you leave the capital of Tallinn, even taking into account the other major cities, size of this place, there's not a lot of density in population. You have an elite sort of group of Estonians that are exceptionally well educated, have traveled. There is a thing that the e-residency people like to trumpet, is that they have more unicorn startup companies that have come out of Estonia than any other country in the world. Famously cited is the example of Skype. Skype was formed and created by a team of several people that were from Estonia, and before they were sold to Microsoft. Wise, formerly known as TransferWise, is a more recent one. A lot of sort of this startup and investment that happens here in Tallinn. But that sort of strata of society here is, they're an incredible group, very, very well educated, world traveled, and very ambitious. And I would say they're a minority. The Estonian people are sort of stratified in this way. Then after that, you have people that are also educated, but haven't maybe traveled much, and sort of have a more internal sort of view of things in life. And the education system here seems to be really quite good. There's been news and internationally that there's a lot of reason to praise the system. They've modeled it, if I'm not mistaken, a lot after the Finnish system and the Swedish system and the German system of education, and they've been investing particularly in teachers and in the education system, and they have a big part of a substantial part of attention that is paid to making sure that families can happen, that people can have kids, that they can grow, and that they can not have to worry about things like medical bills or education fees and these kinds of things. So there's a lot of government support, regardless of income, for young families, and for supporting children and the creation of them. And if you have a country that's floating under 1.5 million, then you can see why they would want to do that and be really serious about that. So going down in the strata of the type of people you have here, then you have like a working class group that have a very, very strong identity, and maybe that goes up to everyone. A very, very strong Estonian identity, and you have at this point, although at all levels of that, I'd say you have this binary element, which is that there are Russian Estonians, and then you have ethnically Estonians, and the difference between them, in some cases, and certainly as you go down into sort of the working class realm, is language, and in some cases ideology. When you get into the older people, a lot of them have very good memories about the Soviet times. Even not even that older, maybe a little bit older than myself, like people going between 40 and 50. There is some nostalgia for the Soviet times when sort of everything was kind of sorted. You didn't have to be in the rat race. There was everything was sort of sorted out for you, and Estonia was one of the more idealized places in the Soviet Union. It was sort of one one of the more Western, as all the Baltic countries were, the more Western style kind of living and Soviet countries. But yeah, so that binary element is one of the divided parts of the society here. And there's this people from Russian heritage, and then there's people that identify more with the Estonian part. I've personally found that I've met people that are like really very open and cool about like having Russian heritage, or they're just like, Russians, Estonians, we've mixed so much over the years that what's the difference? Nobody can say that they're not Russian ethnically or genetically. And then there are people who are like, oh, Russian? No. We are the purest of the pure Estonians. And then that's where you get into some ugly stuff, which is that there is a sort of nationalistic and a racially motivated ideology that is quite big here, I'd say. And I think a lot of people, especially in the capital and especially in those upper stratas, would say that that's not a thing. We don't have that here, but it's rubbish. Even their own equivalent of like a mashing up of the FBI and the CIA, they call it capo. They put out a report just this year saying that this is one of the biggest problems that we have right now is like racial extremism and the building of sentimentalities that lean towards that.
But is it like a white supremacy, or is it anti-Russian? Like where do they stand? Is it like an Estonian national identity thing, or is it like a more of a white thing?
Yeah. I can't pretend to try and simplify it because, but I think I can condense it to this, and that is that the most egregious parts of that are only a very small percentage of it is vocal. There is a much wider group of people that believe and espouse, white power and supremacy. But publicly, there's even a political party here called the Conservative Party, and they publicly say, no, we are not racist. We just don't want our country to be for anyone else other than for Estonians, and that would include Swedish people. They're white. We don't want them here either. They can come and visit, but we don't want them mixing in with our people and diluting us. And like, wait a minute, you just said you don't want them mixing in, so how is this not racial? Like, well, because we're talking about white people and they're white. We don't want them here either. And so that's sort of the above the line rhetoric, and then but there is a big problem with it here, and it's growing. That Conservative Party, for example, that I'm talking about, has in the latest polls like 30%, almost 30%, if not 30% already, of public support in a poll, which should be fairly accurate, and that's climbing up like from last year pretty quickly. So
and
that's a big problem. Yeah.
You as a, you're not Estonian. Does that make you feel threatened? Basically, is that you're basically a target because you've married in and you've taken one of their women? Is that kind of the idea?
It's definitely. I'm not. I don't feel like I'm unsafe or anything like that. Yeah, I mean, I have had a run-in with people like this, a real bad one too, actually. But it's not like in the middle of town in Tallinn. Like, it's not something that's a problem. It's not out in the open, and the way that I described it previously is like that's part of these kinds of mentalities and this extremism is there are elements of it that are very loud and very out there. But there is a lot of it that just stays underneath because that's where it has to stay, because it is still fringe, and there's still a majority that are not interested in that, or at least see that that's destructive and that's a problem. So it's not like there are people like running around very frequently bashing foreigners, and I don't feel unsafe here. But no, I've had my run-in with these people, and they exist, and uh, you know, you do have to keep in mind as someone who is coming to Estonia, if you were interested with like technology-wise or job offers, which is something that's happening more and more. Like they have a shortage of like developers, for example, and so if you were going to come here, that is a thing. But I'd have to say also that it's also a thing in America. I mean, the tensions that we're experiencing are not just tensions in America. We're people are dying, and it starts with uh, we can say culture wars, and then it turns into these hot wars, and people get hurt, and people die. So this is something that is a problem all over the world. I'd say here it's just a bit more of a problem, and I would also say with full confidence that local authorities would deny it. But on the other hand, believe me, you can see Capo put out this report saying this is a massive problem for us. We need to deal with it now. And it will get worse before it gets better. But
Well,
no,
I'm
I don't
looking.
feel unsafe like day to day, anything like that.
I'm looking at. I mean, we got the Wikipedia thing pulled up right now, and then it's you look at the ethnic groups, and then 24.7% Russians. Now, would these people would they be targets of that ultra nationalist group, or is it more like anybody who's like really, really, really non-Estonian? Like,
Well, with the ultra
how does that
nationalists, like
work?
yeah, it's complicated for Estonians too because like they're even though there are people that are definitely deluded in thinking that there is a pure Estonian group. It's just historically, like you would just know that that's just not possible. You're Polish, you're Ukrainian, you're mixed in with the Finns. There's a lot of Russian, like there's Swedish. Like when you're ruled by other countries for so long, and I don't mean this in any insulting way, when you've been slaves for centuries, your purity is a joke. It's just not possible. So if you have Polish people coming in here, then the problems and or Ukrainians, for example, and they would come as workers, you know, especially in like construction or otherwise. Then there's going to be a friction there that isn't always, I'd say, mostly is not associated with ultranationalism, but just we're different, and so we're having these things, and you know, I don't know. Maybe they think that maybe that's probably a gateway to nationalism for people because this kind of stuff comes from fear, and fear that then turns into confidence, and then overconfidence, and then prejudice. So pride leading to prejudice. Um, so yeah,
Yeah,
and a lot of I'd say the more extreme elements of that, and I'd say this anywhere in the world, and I really I don't this is bad stuff. I mean, and it exists, and it's getting worse. But I don't want to say this is something that is unique. Like we do have this problem in America, and there is this problem in surrounding countries in Europe, and it's something that that you know you'll find it, and it's something that we're talking about globally. But the association is very frequently with ignorance that then leads to these hatreds. Ignorance combined with fear
yeah.
leads to
I
these
think
problems.
I think the big part of it is a scarcity mentality. You know, it's like Estonia for Estonians. Anybody coming in is taking our benefits, and we're paying into the system. You know, there's always going to be this like, what about us? We're paying into it, so there's always going to be this kind of exclusion, you could say. But I mean, I think it comes from this like fear and scarcity, that kind of thing. You know, there's some
It's
underlying.
definitely you're right. And it all this not to apologize for the nastiest elements of this because it is pure evil. It is absolutely that, and you can see how it is that World War II happened and how it is that those that people rallied around these imagined principles of like, just because you are who you are, it means that you're due quite a lot and you're better than these people. It's like what we were talking about before. Well, God said that your house is mine, your land is mine. So get the fuck out, because that's the ultimate authority. I'm justified. It's very similar. It's something that it goes back for as long as we've since we were cave dwellers. That's a very seductive thing for people, but it all just it does get perpetuated through just a lack of information. And no amount of, for example, if I take myself as an example, no amount of me saying I pay in the top 5% of all residents in this country taxes. I pay a lot of taxes in this country, way more than I would in the US. And I could say that to someone who's like this, one of these white nationalist people in Estonia, and they wouldn't even know what the fuck I'm talking about. They're just like, no, you're an N-word. You're not from here. That's.
Would they really call you an N-word? You're
they call these kinds of
white,
people. They call anyone.
You're white passing. I guess maybe in America you are, but maybe in Estonia you're not. You're in a pretty pale place.
There's no diversity here whatsoever, and that's again, I don't blame them for that.
It's Estonia.
It is what it is.
It's not. That's the thing with diversity. I feel like everybody's trying to be like America. We're like, oh, we're diverse. America's the immigrant country. We're supposed to be diverse.
Yeah.
But like,
that's right.
You're like a small Baltic country. How many migrants do you need? Like, they're not America? Like it's Estonia. So
you put it that way. How many migrants do you need? This is a problem again in America, in California, anywhere where you have agriculture or where you have the need for labor. Like we're having a global shortage of this. You talk about, a place that was a big part of your character, I believe, and certainly a big part of your life, Japan. Like population wise, they are fucked right now. We're talking about they're at what, 100, what are they, 120 million, the whole country? By 2050, they're supposed to be like 75 million. That's the trajectory they're on. Birth rates are way low, 30%, above 30% of the population's above 65. They don't have people. So
yeah.
What is Suge? What's
and the thing that I've noticed in Japan, like, I used to live there when I was in high school in the early 2000s. Back then, it's not that different than how it is today, I feel like. But there are a few differences, and one of them is that there's more foreigners working low-wage jobs in Japan. There's like convenience store workers, they were like Indonesian students and that kind of thing. Like You didn't see that in the early 2000s. You see that now, though.
Yeah, and it's because you have to have it, but it's like pulling teeth for the Japanese, because they still, it's the same thing all over. It's like there are people that are very vocal and say we are the Yamato bloodline. Don't fuck with it. That purity is not something that should be compromised. And then there are people that are like, well, it's just our nationality. Like we don't want to get rid of that. We can't have people from Brazil mixing too much, although that's happened quite a lot, specifically with Brazilians. And there's this problem that we don't have enough people to work at the 7-Elevens. We don't have enough people, to get right to one of the core roots of the problem. We don't have the people to work at the retirement homes. And so then you have to open it up. You have to make it more. So what I was going to say was the prime minister, I believe, proposed that 350,000 visas be issued, like 5-year visas. But the restrictions on it are insane. You can't bring your family. You can't. That was the biggest restriction. It's like you can't bring your family, and you can't stay longer than 5 years. So it's like we want to deal with, and 350,000 is a drop in the bucket. It's not enough to deal with the labor shortages in Japan, which like people are desperate to hire there. They need people, but then they say, well, this is our solution to it, which is fucking rubbish. Like, either the only solution for Japan in this case is they need to change culturally. They need to change their attitude. And it's not just nationalist people. Everybody in Japan has to be like, look, we're at a critical point where we need to allow more immigration. We're not going to
But
fuck our way back to 120 million. It's not going to happen.
couldn't they just keep doing what they're doing, where they allow people to work there, but they don't become Japanese, but they have a good life in Japan? It's like a green card thing. But then they're like really like hunkered down. Oh, Japan is Japan, blah, blah, blah. But they still have a bunch of migrant workers, and it works itself out. Could they not just do that though? If they like, isn't that like a compromise?
I think those are two different problems. One is, how do we deal with the immediate issue of labor shortage, and the other is, how do we deal with the fact that we're shrinking super fast as a country? Like, if
Yeah.
you don't get over the Yamato bloodline shit, then your country is going to go down tens of millions of people in population every 5 years.
Yeah. Well,
That's
I
what's
mean,
happening right now.
it sounds like Estonia, like what you said about all the benefits and things. It sounds like it's a very pro family place. Like they're making it
It is,
easy
yeah.
for people to have families. It just Japan not have such like initiatives. Or what do you think?
So I think they do, but there are this is back to what I'm saying, that the biggest barrier here, and to the biggest population barrier, is cultural. It's not logistical. It's not the government setting up. And I'll tell you, like, there something like a third of the women that are in childbearing ages in Japan are not having kids and not getting married. And that has everything to do with the fact that they don't want that life. Because culturally, women have to do specific things for the kids. And men, even if they're willing to, have an anxiety about it. And somewhere in the back of their head, they're like, this is not for me. It's just, the burden everywhere falls on women more, but it's especially big culturally and difficult in Japan. And that is a negative feedback loop with regard to this problem. So again, my opinion is that it's a cultural problem that's going to be, either Japan's going to have a total cultural revolution, bad phrasing, a huge change in their culture and in the way that they relate to each other, women, men, familial roles, or they're going to just shrink into nothingness, be
You
taken over
know,
by,
I'd say I have a big connection to Japan because I went to school there, and I know a lot of Japanese people, but I'd say most of the Japanese people I know have a very international background. And I don't really know the pulse of like Japanese people my age, like what do they think about all this stuff? I mean, I know what the people I grew up with think, but they're tainted
they're
with
different.
the global perspective. I don't know
That's
the
right.
Japanese perspective, except for one dude. I got one dude who I know from college, Beijing study abroad too, for that matter,
Mhm.
who's very Japanese and like worked in Nagoya for a long time. He's not like a cosmopolitan Tokyo guy. He's like a Nagoya guy. This is
I
super
get it.
corporate Japan where the only life is corporate life. There's nothing else outside of that.
I have a German friend that's kind of like that. He's total he's a total salaryman, and it's weird because he's German, right? But he's like, and he's still like the token guy sometimes, but he spits shit hot Japanese, and he's culturally totally absorbed. And I don't think he's ever going to leave Japan. Um, like,
Oh
and
shit, you
he's an
you kind of
exception to the rule.
froze.
Is like, if
I
you
don't know
look
what
at
the
it.
connection is. It your side?
Oh, sorry.
How does Estonia have poor connection? What's
Yeah,
going on?
I can tell you, if you can hear me now. The
I
problem
can hear
is,
you.
so we're redoing the kids' bedroom. I'll show you.
Okay.
You see this
Yeah.
stuff here. So as a result, I have put hard line Ethernet wiring into this apartment, so that we could have beautiful coverage. But because this room's being redone, and this is where I'm doing my call with you, our podcast, um, I I don't have a wireless router in here. It's been unplugged because the face plates are off, and so that's part of the reason. I apologize for that.
Okay, well, it is what it is. It's not that bad.
Yeah.
I feel like even when you get cut off, it kind of catches up, and I hope people can understand. It's only been a few times. But anyways, dude, I'm really this has been really cool to learn more about Estonia because it's one of these places where I asked an Estonian about Estonia, and because they're from Estonia, it's hard for them to give me something that I could contextualize, you know. But since you're a foreigner in Estonia, it's a lot more digestible, I think. Like, what do you do for fun, like on a weekend? Like, okay, if I'm a mid-30s guy, I'm gonna visit Estonia. What do you tell me to do if I have like a week?
Um, like anywhere, there's a singer that I really like. He's one of my favorite artists. His name's Sturgill Simpson, and he has a line in one of his songs that he said, I've seen every country in the world from the inside of a bar." So I would say that you could do that in Estonia, and you could spend a week here and just be on a bender, and you will have a blast. It would be a real shame, though. It'd be a real shame because the country, the greatest thing that it offers to someone visiting who is just looking to uh, enjoy themselves and refresh and is nature. Like I said, over half the country, or now I would say about half the country, and the statistics you have to take with a grain of salt, but a large portion of the country, almost half of it, is covered in forest. You have a coastline all the way around the country that is dotted on the edges with these islands that are pretty incredible. So hiking, boating, all of that, taking ferries to the different islands. It's all the best part of Estonia, the nature. And
Now,
then I mean,
are you limited by time of year though? Like with that sort of stuff, like it gets pretty cold, right?
well, funny enough, just out of the peculiarity of where the how the jet stream works and how the location with regards to the Baltic Sea and everything, is it doesn't get frigidly cold here. I mean, it literally does get frigidly cold. Minus 20 is not unusual in the dead of winter, but that's about as cold as it gets, at least for now. Things are changing, right? Really quite quickly. But that's about as cold as it gets. So I'm from Chicago, born and raised there. So we had colder winters in Chicago. Um, so during the winter, I mean, even if it's minus 15, I would still tolerate that. Since I've been living here, I've been a runner. At the moment, I have a knee injury, so I can't, and it's killing me. But even in minus degree temperature, it's not going to get to like minus 25 and minus 30. And if it does, it's super rare. It's still tolerable. You can still go out. I just this winter took my two boys on sleds, through the trails, and they have trails all over the country, like these prepared trails through the forests, and that's just a fantastic thing. And
So they have like
it's the
a
greatest.
forest management system that's pretty active here.
Yeah, it's called the RMK, and I don't remember what the K is. Riigimets kaitse maybe, kaitse like protection, forest management and protection. But yeah, they have this trail system all over, and it's pretty well documented, and like camping sites and whatnot. So yeah, I would say to a young man coming here, I would say bring your camping equipment. If you like kite sailing, bring that stuff or get ready to rent it, because that's the best part. And then sauna, sauna somewhere on near the water or in a forest with some beers. That's the best part of Estonia, and that's the gift that I've received from
Okay, yeah.
Estonia as a country.
Dude, I can totally see why you're quite settled there. I mean, obviously you have your wife is from there, but still, it sounds like a pretty comfortable place to be.
You know, the biggest change that we wanted and that we got coming here was getting out of an urban environment, like a big urban environment, which we've been in for so long. I was in Beijing for like almost 8 years, and then Tokyo, and having grown up in Chicago, in the city, and uh, just wanted something different, especially now that we were starting our own family. So, yeah, I see you're pulling up the pollution things. Like, look, man,
Yeah, I
that's enough.
mean,
We didn't want that.
Beijing is kind of a special case with terrible pollution. I mean, I was in Shanghai. It was terrible there. I mean, compared to Austin, but still, Beijing compared to Shanghai was bad. Like, Shanghai's already terrible. Like 150 AQI, whatever the hell it's called. Like, we wouldn't take our kid outside to the park, if it was too high, if it was over 200 or something. Beijing
Yeah.
is just disgusting. Like, I remember being there years back and just, it was like over the chart. Like, they couldn't even like calculate how high the AQI was because it was so high.
But Nathan, I want to say in the same breath, like it kind of pains me a little bit to call Beijing disgusting. It is. It's that soup is fucked me up. That air was terrible. And not to get into anything political, but just that part, like you can't drink from the tap unless you want to get kidney stones, and you can't be outside sometimes unless you want to get lung cancer. You do it for long enough. Like that stuff is terrible. But I also haven't, and I believe you have some of this too. Really great memories.
Oh
and
yeah,
things that I wouldn't give back,
dude, and there's all this kind of stupid fake beef between like expats in Shanghai and Beijing. It's kind of just good fun. But there is some stuff about Beijing that, at least back when you lived there and back when I spent time there, that was kind of had more of an edge to it. It was a little more exciting, on the cultural side and kind of on the countercultural side, at least. Music scene, art scene, a little more exciting in Beijing. Actually, a lot more exciting in Beijing than Shanghai. I don't know about now, but at least in your days
gone.
in Beijing,
It's
definitely.
gone. It's over. Yeah, that's the other thing to keep in mind. That's the subtext of this is that is gone. That it was kind of a utopic. I mean, the way like there was work for everybody. The people that were in Beijing, not just the Beijingers. If you were, I have Beijing friends that are just fantastic. I still talk to them. But even like the foreigners that were in Beijing were also consistently pretty cool, interesting people. That I still keep in contact with more than people from college, for example. But that doesn't exist anymore. That world situation is gone, and things have changed.
You
And
cut out
China
for a bit.
has
You cut out for a
changed,
bit, but
even the way. So, yeah, I'm just saying China has changed in the way that it communicates with the rest of the world. Whereas before it was like everyone is happy, this is great, and now they're like, don't fuck with us.
yeah. And then like when you were there,
Because we're
it's
coming up.
kind of when this China Twitter emerged, where all the journalists, most of them based up there in Beijing, and they're all on Twitter, and it almost this scene was kind of created there, but a lot of those people aren't in Beijing anymore because they got kicked out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's to me, it's night and day. And even having gone back years ago when I started to see this change with digital currencies and not digital currencies exactly, but the processing of money, which is the precursor to a change over into all digital currencies, like using QR codes and WeChat Pay and Alipay. Like when I went back to be there just as a visit, like I had already seen like this is not the place that I lived in. It's just so different, and it's even more so now, I'd say. Um, yeah.
Hey, so we're 2 hours in. Do you got someplace to be, or do
Yep.
you need to wrap
It's
up?
time to
Or,
go to work. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm off.
You're off. You got work. You got work to get to.
Absolutely, yeah. But I think we should do it again.
Yeah,
And
dude.
I'm looking forward to you doing Scott Silverman. Maybe next. I don't know.
Maybe next time I'm gonna talk to him. I think we got some good teaser material for Scott to come on because he's a legend, you know. And dude, I mean, I'm living in Austin. I've seen him in person only once since I've moved here, because of COVID and all that shit. But we've been doing a lot of work remotely together, so I'm definitely like talking to him on a weekly basis.
Right on. Yeah. So yeah, tell me when that happens, and I think it would be uh, really interesting to see what he thought of this podcast. Is this even a podcast?
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
a podcast. I mean, it's
video
I'm
cast?
gonna put it
I don't know.
on YouTube, and but I think it makes more sense to listen to this as like an audio thing. Like, just I mean, that's what I would do if I were a listener, just because you can multitask. If you have YouTube, you gotta have the video open. It's cool if you're on like your TV, you got your little Roku TV going on. You search Expats on air, you click the Nestor Santana episode, you press play, you do a little busy work, you have it on in the background. You see that works. But
Yeah.
anyways, yeah, there's super cheesy promotion there. Anyways,
You got you got
it's
to refine that one. I think you can do
yeah, no,
better.
I was just bullshitting, man. I've been drinking these Topo Chico hard seltzers. It's like the hot thing in
Oh,
Texas
nice.
now. Yeah, they're pretty cheap,
What's the percentage?
4.7. And
Oh,
they're
that's easy drinking. Great job.
yeah, they're like
Good choice.
100 calories a pop. I don't know. I like
Right
Topo
on.
Chico, and if you don't know Topo Chico, they make like carbonated water, sparkling water, but it's Mexican. Yeah, you know it.
Um,
You're like practically Mexican, right? But not.
yeah. So it's funny that you say that. There was a guy just as I was leaving Beijing who started uh, describing me to other people as a Mexican American technologist. I shit you not, which is hilarious because I'm not Mexican.
Yeah.
Uh, but also, I had never been described as a technologist. Although I think that's kind of cool.
See, this sounds
Certainly, I'm not
like
acting as
how
one.
I would have described you years ago, like what I was saying earlier. Like, oh, he's this mysterious like tech guy, and he's Mexican.
And he's
But no, I
Mexican.
never. I actually never
I've got
described you
no
as
problem
Mexican.
being associated with Mexicans. I think,
No,
contrary to some people's understanding, that they're great people,
Mexico's cool.
and got a lot of time for them.
I like Mexico,
So,
but I like Texas too. And there's kind of a rocky history there with the two, but they're both great in my opinion, and they're kind of like almost the same at the same time.
well, yeah, that's one of those historical relationships that's like, well, this used to be Spain, this used to be Mexico, then it was
Yeah,
America, and that's how it's always going to be. But that happened, and so let's not ignore that.
yeah.
There are things
There's
there that are interesting.
every so often I see some Facebook posts where it's like, did you know that like America stole Texas from poor little Mexico? And
Yeah,
we're
and
like
it's never going back. Sorry.
but was it really poor little Mexico? It's like one colonial power versus another colonial power fighting over a piece of land that a bunch of like white people were invited into at one point. It's just so complicated and strange.
Yeah, and then there were natives were involved as well,
Yeah,
right?
dude, and they got the short end of the stick, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean that's a complicated story too. We're talking about uh, inching into race a bit, and for I have indigenous ancestry,
Yeah.
not a lot, but enough that I'll talk about it, and and it's the same thing everywhere. Indigenous people all over get the short end of the stick. Even when the U.S. government, or let's say the French government, worked in conjunction with indigenous peoples, for better or for worse, like they still didn't get a great deal out of it. Um, and that's the historical theme, I think.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
was often a by the way, which was often like Well, you know that contract we had. By the way, we're just gonna throw that out now, and maybe just change it. But you don't have a say. You know, there's just all that like wounded knee shit, all the stuff with the Sioux Indians, like up there in the north, and it's crazy stuff, man. But yeah, we don't need to get into all that. It's okay. I don't know. I'm too fucked up to talk about Native American history, man. And especially with like an Ecuadorian guy, you know, who's part native.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it some other time. Thanks a lot for having me
Yeah, dude.
on
Is
the show, Nathan.
one thing before we go. I mean, obviously, we talked about your company, but is there anything you want to plug or just anything cool you'd want to put out there in the airspace just to promote before you get off the air?
Oh, unfortunately, everything's very formative right now. There is my wife, who is awesome and very interesting, and is toiling away, doing her like day job, working for a Facebook advertising company. Which actually that'd be something we can talk about next time. Is Tim Cook versus Zuckerberg. But that's not her end goal or passion. What she's trying to do at the moment is to make cosmetics that are made from food refuse, or refuse that is organic,
Yeah.
and doing it in a way that the packaging is going to be very much in line with that mentality and idea that we don't want to waste, we want to reuse, and also make it so that disposability is also taken into account. Now, that sounds like a little bit trite, I have to admit, but the thing is, the reason that it's been talked about so much is because there aren't very good solutions, and a lot of
There
brands,
really aren't.
if we talk about just like beauty products, for example, um, they don't have a good solution for it. And it's very difficult to switch over, especially when you're making tens of millions of packages or hundreds of millions of products, individualized. How do you switch over your legacy manufacturing systems to something that is going to be more sustainable, even
Yeah.
if it's a compliance requirement? Like, how do you do that in a way that truly is? So she's working on something like that, and I think that's something I'd love to plug in a future episode and talk about. But it's still
Yeah,
in its
dude.
formative time. Yeah. And
And
for
on the
ScanTrust, we've got a lot of changes happening. I hope before the end of the year. Um, but in the meantime, if you're interested in seeing how QR codes can turn physical products into a connection point with consumers, then check out the website. That's it for now.
scantrust.com, not .org, not .net, not .info,
Oh,
.com, the real deal. Nestor, thanks for coming on, and maybe if it's not too close from now, like the next flare up between Zuckerberg and Tim Cook, maybe we reconnect, and then we could talk about that kind of stuff then.
right on. See you
All
next
right,
time.
man. See you later. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.